Committee of 21 November 2024. Acknowledge councillors who are here, council staff who will be presenting during the course of the meeting, and those who are watching on live stream. Start the meeting with the karakia. Whakatakati ho ki te uru, whakatakati ho ki te tonga, kia mā kena kena ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he oka, he uho, te he moriora. We have an apology from Councillor Graham. Any other apologies? Not, I move. Councillor Bruce seconds. Any declarations of interest and items on the agenda? Urgent business? Public forum? No. So we'll go straight to the minutes of the previous meeting, October the 10th, page 10 of the agenda. Any questions on page number 10, as you were page number 11? Page 12.
Yes.
Councillor Finch.
Down the bottom, will the South Bruce with the removal of Waihola, that's North Bruce, not South Bruce.
Thank you. Page 13. I've got a question, bottom of page 13, top of page 14. There's a comment, there will be an answer to the question why we spent 4 mil and cannot get compliant water. The legal review of the contract will be back in the next few weeks. Has that been received? Maybe leave that as a question for follow-up at a subsequent meeting. And also the impact of flooding on our maintenance and CapEx program for the year. We talked about an assessment of that cost. Probably the question is to you, Steve. Is that assessment being completed, or is that going to come back to a subsequent council meeting?
It's still ongoing because the reporter is still working with the insurance side of things. So they're still compiling the consequential costs and getting an understanding of what's going to be covered by insurance. So yes, there'll still be a follow-up to that. We can see whether or not that would be for the 5th of December meeting, but at least we'll know if we do have it or not. We'll update the 5th of December meeting to the progress.
Yeah, and an estimate of some sort, if that's possible as well. Any other questions on the minutes from anybody? If not, may we please have a mover? Councillor Herbert, Councillor Finch.
Sorry, on page 15.
Page 15. Yep.
Item number 6.
Yes.
It's got Sharon Jenkinson, CFO, was in attendance to speak to the report and answer any questions. The following points were highlighted.
Yeah.
And nothing further on that.
So just an insert in there. Yes, I recall the conversation and there were some points she made. So thank you. I'll work with the Secretariat and we will fill in that gap. Everyone comfortable? We have a mover, we have a seconder, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Next item is, and I apologise, I normally do a written report, but in this case, verbal report only. And it's specifically around the workshop that we've got planned on 28th of January. And you will get some homework questions. But I thought I'd take the opportunity today just to give you some background, and don't panic too much about taking too many notes because you'll get something from me in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is reviewing the terms of reference. Is it helpful to help us help council achieve its goals for the year? Is it complete? What about the reporting lines in that terms of reference? And one that particularly comes to mind is those reports that are duplicated on other committees. Is that the best use of time, or is there maybe a better way we can do that? Better type of report possibly. Second thing is to review the agenda reports. And one of the things I want you to do, just as we go through today, just take notes those regular reports, are they giving you the information that you need to assist council in achieving those terms of reference? What's helpful in the reports that we're reading? More importantly, what is missing from those reports? What either isn't necessary in terms of the volume of information and can be extracted, or alternatively might do it every second meeting, every third meeting in terms of frequency. With respect to debt management, what is the additional Treasury information that you need? What is important to you as an elected member in terms of Treasury matters? Purpose of borrowing, an analysis of the borrowing, should I say, the purpose of that borrowing, up to date, but more importantly going forward. And for me, the important reporting is not so much the historical reporting, but the projected requirements and the timing of those requirements. The cost of that debt to council, as the debt mounts, so the cost becomes more and more significant. Very important, and was raised by a number of you in your meetings with me, debt repayment program, in terms of what that looks like, and the available headroom to council at all times to enable us to understand where we're going with our CapEx program particularly. Fourth item we're going to be talking about is ultimately what is the strategic purpose of risk and assurance, and finally training needs that you may have to assist you to do your job. As legislation changes, so our training requirements and knowledge change as well. That can be anything from technology to the more technical stuff that we're doing, and particularly around financials that we're having a look at. So it's about a 4.5 to 5 hour workshop that we're having. That's on the Tuesday. The onus is then on me to work Tuesday night and Wednesday morning to get a report that will come back on the agenda, which is circulated Wednesday afternoon, and that will encompass our work program for the 2025 financial year. So as I say, the key thing today is just think about the reports that we're receiving, and obviously there will be questions come through, but in terms of the discussion that we're going to have, I'll be meeting with staff tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I think it is. We've got a scheduled time just to look at some of those reports, particularly the financial ones that I want a wee bit more detail added into as well. So any questions on that proposal? If not, I'd move my verbal report. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Kennedy. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 3 on the agenda is the Health and Safety and Major Projects report. That's been presented by
No one, Mr. Chairman.
by nobody.
We've today and this morning we've got a bit of a problem with sickness hitting people. You'll note that Sharon's not here. She's actually pretty sick, so she couldn't even come on Teams, Zoom, so that's not happening. And also Christina's down, so she's out as well. So we're happy to take the report as read. And we will try to answer any questions, and those that we can't, we will just hold over and come back to you on.
Thank you, Mr. CE. Any questions in respect to this report that we pass on to Christina? Councillor Herbert.
I had a couple of questions. See, I can make it remarks here anyway. The Three Waters contract, mitigation contract, is it being signed and sorted, or is it?
Well, great timing, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. I was about to say it is almost there, and Linda can just tell you, almost there is actually almost there.
This is this contract between us and Isaacs? Correct. The contract between Isaacs and the subcontractors?
So that's waiting on the execution of the final part. So they've got the back-to-backs in place, but they need ours part of that. And Isaacs have texted me this morning, they've signed. They're now waiting for us. And
so when you say the back-to-backs are signed, they've got a
back-to-back agreed, and our contract forms a part of that agreement to make sure that they're aligned and protected.
Right. So it's still in the process, but we're getting closer.
Very close.
Looks like it's coming to me,
Yes.
councillor, to
Imminent.
sign. Yes.
Thank you. I got a couple of things. Look, I had a comment on the on page 24 under review, audits and actions. There's a template there. It says about the person inspecting vehicles, 210 vehicle inspections. I just wonder, is that done by different people? Do we know, or is it the same person, or is it? You're looking like you don't know that level of detail, Steve, which it was a Christine's question. The point I would make is in my experience, if you've got the same person doing the same checks month after month after month, complacency sets in and nothing changes. You've got to have a different set of eyes looking at things. Would be the comment I would
Yes.
make.
Sorry, councillor, and through you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at his worship because his worship does the ones, so there are individual vehicle checks. The system requires you to check them. So
And each individual checks their own vehicle.
yes, and we have pool vehicles that get checked as well. And that's why I was looking at his worship, because he's doing his own checks.
Okay.
The stupid thing was,
I'm more worried
Arms
about
was doing my check and had good clothes. I could do it the weekend in my place. Let's work it out.
The other question I had was about there was a rollover there, so just wondering if the person was all right and what the circumstances were behind that. That was all I'd ask.
And again, Linda is just in
That
time.
happened in my team. I hope I can be heard, but the person was all right. It was a rollover that was completely a flip, so it ended on his wheels. It was at night, coming back from a plant after a call out.
So it was on the road,
It
wasn't
was
it?
on the road
Oh, okay, it was on the road, right.
and ended up onto the left, complete rollover of the vehicle. And it's highlighted one thing, is that the smart track system, which generally is our safety mechanism, doesn't recognise rollovers that occur in less than 3 seconds.
Wow.
So it was that quick. The vehicle wasn't a write-off.
So the device thing didn't go off?
No.
Well, they're a waste of time, aren't they?
Well, we've looked at all of the other devices available in New Zealand, and they all have similar features. One has 4 seconds before it alerts. So we've got the best one in terms of the 3 seconds, but I have raised that as a concern.
Was he injured?
No injuries. Was able to call emergency services.
Good vehicle.
I was alerted because the fence people needed the GPS location. I could log into Smart Track from home and find that and give the exact GPS coordinates.
So what actually caused it, do you know?
So the combination of factors, we believe speed, because we can see the speed he's entered the corner at. There's also a build-up of gravel on the corner of the road.
Thank you.
Which, can I ask which plant he was
He
coming?
was visiting Purua.
Thanks, Linda. Councillor Herbert, any other questions? Any other questions?
No, thank you, sorry, all good, thank you.
Yeah, questions from anybody else? Councillor Volwheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you, and this again will be to Linda. Sorry, just
Good thing you came in.
under 3 waters, page 22, the second bullet point is. Sorry, I'm just getting a place here. 15 plants requiring certification. Certification has expired. 15 plants, but how often do they have to be recertified?
It's an annual process, and the certification that we had previously wasn't up to standard, and so we've changed provider for that service, and we're safe are fully aware of where we're at. In fact, they recommended an alternate person we could use, and we're now just faced with the workload of that person. But the good thing about the person we're using now is that they will give us a provisional sign-off. So if there's any improvements to be made, we'll have a provisional sign-off with improvements.
That was a question, Linda, I was going to ask as well. I was just drawn to the comment about auditors' availability, and hopefully that's not impacting negatively on our ability to provide service.
No, not at all.
Other questions?
I have one other question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. That's on page 23, and this results to the other health and safety issue, high risk one, which was the hate speech one. How was that resolved?
I think that's where we need Christina to answer that one. It's interesting because it seems pretty black and white with the, pretty blunt, in terms of the way it's categorised. I think sometimes the system categorisation is an issue as a consequence of how it's categorised, because I don't recall that it sort of reached to my level in the sense of what it might, if you just see it on the face of it, you might think, oh, heck. I don't recall that it reached that sort of a level that, in that sense, but we really need to just, and I think it's more of a categorisation side, we just need Christina to be able to explain how that was resolved.
Do we know what, do you know what team that staff member was in?
I don't recall, sorry. But again, that's just something we can get more detail.
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to know, if it was a recent one or if it's the one
It's a councillor.
back. Yeah.
Hate speech.
It makes sense. And it went to, if it is that one, then it went to the police.
Right.
I think it needs to be formally recorded.
Good team effort to answer that question. And thinking about it, I believe you're right.
A couple of questions that I've got, which will just be added onto the list, I would imagine, in staff absences. Page 20, the second bullet point talks about health and safety review issues open past 30 days. So my question to be responded is, are there many? And if so, what is the issue? And on page number 21, at the bottom, under item 3, there's a list of policies, review date, and some of those is significantly expired. So just to get some feedback from staff as to when they will be signed off. Are there any other questions with respect to this report? If not, may I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Payne. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Item number 4, protozoal and bacteria compliance report.
Good morning. I'm here to present the protozoal and bacterial compliance report, and take it as being read, and willing to take any questions.
Bottom of page 27, it talks about Waitahuna and Tuapeka West supplies not achieving compliance without significant upgrades. Are they budgeted to be done this year?
They are included within the greenfield upgrade.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Herbert.
Daniel, you'd be disappointed if I didn't ask a question, so here we go. And this probably alludes to what's been talked about just a wee bit earlier in the meeting, as far as the looking at our general items, and also the $4 million we've already spent. So just on page 31, under the compliance, I look at Mark Flat and it says the UVT now controls the plant which will improve the UV treatment. New reservoir work is underway which will help improve compliance. I've got the meeting from October, which says exactly the same.
Okay.
I've got a whole lot of meetings, and I've got ones that go right back to March. And it says the UV now controls the plant and will improve the UV treatment. New reservoir work is underway, which will help improve compliance.
That's right.
It is word for word exactly the same. I know nothing's changed, but if I can add to that, so then this afternoon in our infrastructure strategy and operations meeting, it says the UV dose and UVT was not sufficient to achieve compliance.
That's right.
So I kind of ask the question again, is that the wrong UV treatment? In your experience?
Well, I think you're asking the wrong person. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I think you're asking the wrong person for that. I'm not qualified to be assessing which UV should be going into each plant. So that shouldn't be with...
Okay, so going back to your report then.
Yes.
So it says the same thing repeatedly. In this report, new reservoir work is underway which will improve compliance. What is that?
I believe that is for contact time to
The
improve.
tank that's already been built and is already full.
Mhm.
There's no more new work being done.
Okay, well, if there's,
I'm
again,
just trying to get a change. Like, it would be nice to see something.
something different.
So yeah, to be honest, I mean, it's.
Okay, that's fair enough.
You can understand. I mean, you're sick of me asking questions, and I'm tired of asking them, and it's to the point where something has to change.
Sure.
And I'm trying to figure out what it is to try and break this, to try and get in compliance in that treatment. To be honest.
I understand. I understand.
And it looks to me, those two reports are conflicting almost. Because that, you say the UV treatment now controls the plant, which will improve the UV treatment.
If we change will to should, that could make it a bit clearer. Because you can only improve it based upon the quality of the water that's incoming, which was a discussion that Jules had back in October at this same meeting.
But for the layman sitting here that doesn't know a whole lot about this, but I sort of try and educate myself, but that treatment, that UV thing has had months and months and months and months to pull its socks up. And the UV dose and UV was not sufficient to achieve compliance, so it's not doing its job.
Same as North Bruce.
I'm not technically equipped either, but I'll do my best to answer one of your questions, and that is about the reservoir. So it is now being filled, but it's filling slowly, so that hasn't improved the contact time that I'm aware of. And the other thing we're now doing is trialling. We've got a carbon filter process, a unit that's being lent to us by one of our southern partners, and the carbon is arriving at the beginning of December. So we were going to try that to see whether that process will work. We met with Philtech here last week. They're putting together now a plan to help achieve compliance at both North Bruce and Moa Flat. I've asked for that plan to be finished this week because I've said I'm sick of standing up here saying we're working on a plan and we don't seem to have one. And I haven't got it to date, but there is still today and tomorrow left in the week.
I'm not going away.
Because like if you look at the non-compliance under the BACTO and stuff, North Bruce is even worse. It's only 60% compliant, 77% compliant. Yeah, it's even worse.
Councillor Nakatamini.
Yeah, can I just ask, or just on the recount to John there, I've just gone back and had a look at the October reports. I see you've changed the reporting around to put it in percentage terms, daily percentage terms for the previous ones. The other ones were in days. For Moa Flat, it's got very close. It's got 94% for 93, whereas if you go back to October, they were like 0 out of 30 days. So obviously this time you've only missed by 1 or 2 days. So that's obviously been a big improvement.
I'll explain
on the previous. Next time it just may hit it.
And to explain the reasoning behind the change in how it's been reported was based on advice from Becca from when they did our audit report for the year. So instead of reporting it by days, we decided to do it as a percentage.
I'm just saying that that's the best result from our flat, even though it's not quite there. It's the best result I've seen.
So I come back to the issue I raised earlier. It's around the information that you're receiving.
Sure.
How helpful is it? One thing may be a projected time frame or timeline column in this one as well.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is that the wording on there on Moa Flat on page 31 is the same wording we've had for about the last 6 meetings. We're going right back to March, word for word, exactly the same. So it doesn't show me that there's any. The only information I'm getting from this report, then nothing's happening, nothing's changing.
So the supplementary question is, and I don't want you to answer this, but just think about it, what do you want in the report?
I want to know how it's going to be fixed and when. That's that. I mean, what else? That's the.
Yeah, and for me, it's more the when.
So
anyway, that's yeah.
Councillor Volwheeler.
I thought you wouldn't answer that. I was going to answer.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
So I think we have to remember that the issue is why it's so difficult to put something in, including timeframes, bits and pieces, is if you actually haven't got a solution you can't put a time frame to do that. The issue is things are put in place. The UV was put in place to see whether that was a part solution for something. The issue that MoFlat that you've been talking about for a long time was, well, give us a solution that's going to achieve compliance. And various elements have been achieved. I remember previous meetings we've actually had this debate where it says there's actually problems finding an end solution, which is why Filtec finally got employed, because you quite rightly said, spending all this money, we're still not achieving anything, and there's no idea of a solution in an end time frame. And the problem with you can't put an end time frame if you don't have that solution. So whilst there's been improvements, because we have spent money, we've put UVs in, we've done these things, so there's been improvements in that respect, it hasn't solved the whole problem. And we still had the issue that we didn't have a full solution to solve the whole problem. And so you've got the compliance report, which is a statement of fact around things. You've got your committee reports around, what's happening with the plants and other bits and pieces and things like that, which is another source of information. So that's all I'm saying, is that when you're saying, get that, you can have a milestone that says, hey, we're expecting now, as a consequence of previous concerns that we all expressed, we're trying to get a solution generated that's actually going to do the job. That's a milestone, generate that. We then have to implement that. And there'll be another time frame for that, and we'll insert that.
Then it almost needs a plan B and C. If this doesn't work, then we've still got these options to go as well, to try.
We've already been working with our engineer on changing things like chemical dosing and making other changes. But we believe that there is more now about equipment that's required. And so I'm just reflecting and looking at this afternoon's committee report, the UV treatment at Moa Flat. The recording in May was 42%, October 93, and it has been improving. But we know that the plant as it stands, as far as we're aware, will not achieve the current drinking water standards.
So that's the first, that's been actually
All of the things that we've been trying to date, which is why we're now looking at the carbon filter option. And I don't understand what that is, other than it's filled with carbon. We've got the device sitting there waiting and plumbed in, ready for the carbon to go. That is another method of trying to see whether we can get compliance.
You can get a bag of coal from here.
Yeah,
So we've got a number of questions, starting with Mayor Bryan, Councillor Kennedy, and Councillor.
And I know that it's touched on here, but it really goes back to, and I agree with John, I said the frustration, a lot of money's been spent. And like if I bought a car and you told me it could go 100 miles an hour, I bought it and took it for a lap and I got up to 90 and that was that. I'd say you failed me, I want another car. I don't want you to come and put a carburetor on the, why? Whoever it was, Filtec, said, we'll build your plant, tickety-boo. Now that's not tickety-boo, it's kickety-boo. Yeah. We're going to go back to Filtec and we gave them the money. If they'd have said 6 million, well, all right, but that's the money we gave them to fix it. It's not so that we can have an endless succession of costs and delays. So we're going to we've got to put more pressure on them.
So the drinking water standards.
We've spent our money.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the drinking water standards, that plant was built to the old drinking water standards, not to the current drinking water standards. And we have a strong belief that it would never have achieved even the old one. And so we're in that battle with Filtec. We still have the retentions. We're holding their money while we have that debate. But we've also recognised we just need to move on and get it compliant now. And we'll worry about that battle after the event.
Thanks, Linda. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, through you, Chair. You've probably basically answered my question, Linda, was what comebacks do we have with Filtec, and obviously going forward, and hopefully we reach that milestone of getting to this new water standard before they change it to something else. Otherwise, we're always going to be on the back burner, sadly. But thank you for that.
Thank you. That was your question.
Yeah, my question was really on that.
Yeah.
Come back to Tech. So it is good that we've held retention. That's a
Yeah.
plus. And
Councillor Volwheeler?
My question then is, do we have a date when we expect to lift the boil water notice for the Waihola for those, for the township that's connected to the water that's
Milton.
It's imminent. I haven't seen any results, but Daniel will know. He's sitting with a smile. So Daniel, how have the results been this week?
The results have been, through you, Mr. Chair, the results have been very good so far. It's just a matter of the last few things to tidy up, and then it will be, again, putting an exact date on it. I don't want to lift hopes, but it will be in the very, very near future.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just the other challenge we've got is that not everybody in the township is connected to the new pipeline. There are still properties that will be connected to North Bruce, and so we're identifying those through testing. So although we have council records, we have a duty of care, obviously, in lifting the boil water notice to make people aware that they're not going to be on the new pipeline. And so Daniel's team's been working hard doing testing. We're actually using fluoride as a method of testing because we know if there's fluoride in the water, that it's definitely coming from the Milton plant. And it'll be, we're working with the comms team about how we're going to get the messaging out to the community. And that will include, I guess, people that were expecting to be connected and won't be.
So I have a question around that. I know it's in the later this afternoon, but was that to be expected that all of Waihola weren't going to be on it?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first we've heard
First
that,
off,
yeah, some aren't on it. So roughly how many do you know?
I don't know that.
Is it a specific area that there's a certain pipeline? What's the reason?
From what I've seen of the retic, there are properties on the periphery of the township that will, it just depends where the pipework, the retic pipework distribution is running.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, Brian?
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, one of the key benefits of doing the way we did was so that Waihola could grow, which is around the outside. So we're now saying that I can't remember the name of that new subdivision or whatever, it's on the outside. They won't be able to grow from there because we can still no longer supply the water, because that was one of the key triggers to doing this.
So if there's new connections, it doesn't mean that we would connect them to that. We would connect them to the new pipeline rather than anything that's existing. My understanding is that in time, and this will be a strategic thing, that we'll be looking to see that the Milton plant has got the production capacity to connect all of the properties in Waihola.
So you know how we always had it that no more houses could be built in Waihola because we're at the Plimsoll line for water consumption. Are we back to that now? Are we saying that now Milton's got the capacity? So are we going to be telling people, sorry, there'll be no new subdivisions, no new growth until we sort out this Milton bit?
Through you, no, because you've put increased capacity into Waihola from Milton.
Yeah.
You've still got the existing capacity from the rural water scheme. So between the two, there's additional capacity, which was the problem before. There was no capacity. So
Wasn't the Waihola, wasn't that going to Waihola, and then the rural one was getting spread around the need for capacity in the rural, and I didn't think that the Waihola being fed by North Bruce was no longer. Is that right?
Well, and don't get them wrong. It's not like a significant proportion. It's just that we have a duty to identify where they are because they've got to get the right message, right? And so the team is identifying it. It will help when the team can graphically show the properties that we're talking about. And I expect that what we're talking about is where things are going uphill, downhill, whatever, in terms of where things change. So it's a bit hard to talk about that if we haven't got something that can graphically show you what the story is. More capacity in means houses can be built. There's no doubt about that. And that. So we just got to identify those, where the cut-offs are, so that we can just meet that requirement.
Okay, any other questions or observations? There's a few follow-ups, councillor Kennedy.
I'm going to change to urban water now. Sorry, be a pain. So what I'm getting asked all the time from my ratepayers are, is it always going to be now that when we have a wet weather event that we end up becoming non-compliant? Has there been something done to help the water source, the creek, the intake?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so Tapanui. So actually we've got two issues at Tapanui. One is the intake itself, so that's an emerging issue. So the flood or the rainfall event changed the course of the creek, and so we did some temporary emergency works that now that the flow has dropped, once again the intake is struggling to get the quantity of water needed. So we started a meeting on site yesterday to work out a plan, and also we've got to deal with ORC because we obviously need to talk to them about what we propose doing. We have talked about potentially moving some rocks in the river, might be enough to help us for now, but we'll need to do something more permanent. And the second issue is the requirement to have UV treatment at Tapanui. This week we've had 3 prices in now, and now it's about selecting which supplier and how that's going to be funded.
Thanks, Linda. Councillor
Just
Hurley.
without letting the cat out of the bag, have you got a ballpark figure of what a UV treatment might be for a Tapanui?
So I tell you the range of prices, so supply only of the filter is 90k, supply and install up to 500, plus or minus 20%.
You're talking about $500,000
That's the
for the
range.
town of Tapanui.
The supply only is unrealistic because we know there's not space in the plant to actually install the gear. So we actually need to build some supplementary building or have a shed or something. But they'll also, I think the dearest price includes duty standby, which means if one fails, it still flips over. So that's, but we do have a price in the middle as well.
Thank you.
On page 27, there's a recommendation to receive the report. Do I have a mover for that?
Happy to move.
Councillor Herbert, seconded Councillor Kennedy. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Daniel. Linda? Item number 5. 3 waters monthly report.
This report just presents our financial position for the first 3 months of this financial year. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Finch?
Thank you. On page 37, the rural repairs, that once again is fairly high. Is there going to be some time in the future when there's not so many repairs, because there seems to be an awful lot of breaks frequently and issues, and I mean it does mount up to quite a bit. Is our maintenance up to standard? What's the reasoning, do you think?
This is part of, I guess, an ongoing asset management plan. So it's difficult to you can't examine water pipes like you can waste, for example.
Yes.
You can put cameras down and things. So often it is repairs that are needed that indicate a pipe needs replacement. So we just have to work really on where those are happening and look to remedy if we get frequent breaks on a length of pipe to look at replacing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brian?
Thank you, Chair. Just there's a few questions, but just firstly, is overspend and operating deficit the same thing?
Whereabouts are you looking?
So if I go, so page 36, the second bullet point, last line, it says that's an overspend. Then you go down to the second last bullet point, and we're now talking about operating deficit. Operating deficit and overspend. Are they the same thing?
They're not. So in this case, Your Worship, the overspend is in relation to consultancy alone and that budget line. The operating deficit is where the income and the expenditure are offset. We'll be operating with a budgeted deficit across the year because that's how the budget's been approved. Our expenditure exceeds our income.
So consequently, there's two categories there. Are both those categories funded by debt?
So my understanding is that the budgeted deficit across the year is around 3.5 million. And the bullet point at the bottom says that the capital work's not yet funded, no loans have been raised. So given that's a budgeted deficit, then I would expect loans will be raised at some point during the year and will have been budgeted for.
I haven't calculated it was 3.5. I thought it was 1.2, so that's even worse.
1.2 year to date and 3.5 across the year.
But when I asked yesterday, the 1.2, there wasn't any reason, any anomaly for that, so I've just taken it across the year, I'll times it by 4 and we're at 4.8. Is that not right? It's 3.5.
It's 3.5 is the budget.
So I'm getting there. So let's call it 3.5 now. No, let's go back to what we've got. What we've got for the first quarter, and you said it hasn't yet been funded out of debt. So who's paid the bill? How did we pay the bill where's the money flow? If we've incurred the bill, and I presume it's been paid, how do we pay it if we didn't pay it out of debt?
It is likely that it has been paid out of debt, but we don't know how much. It's the usual issue of the difference between we raise debt for cash flow purposes, and then at the end of the year is when we figure out what we've done to need to raise that debt. So it's the two separate processes, and we haven't figured out yet what part of if water has contributed to the debt we've raised so far this year.
So you're
looking at the paper, it looks likely, but we can't say that for sure until we take a deep dive into it. And normally we do this right at the end of the year, but we're starting to try and do this throughout the year now, identify to you guys where we are taking debt out and what for. But yeah, it's the lag issue of cash flow versus what we've actually done.
So, Mr. Mayor, what you're introducing is the primary purpose for my meeting with staff tomorrow.
Yep.
To identify the source of debt that's been raised, what's OPEX, what's CAPEX, and more importantly, what is Three Waters, given a number of scenarios going forward, and what might happen to the debt specific to Three Waters, which potentially will come off the balance sheet.
Yeah, so that is an overarching concern, but the one that I was getting to, and I have 4.8 million because I just did the primary school maths exercise of 1.2 for the first quarter, but if it's 3.5, same thing. So because last year, the calming factor as such was, we've just established Crown Street, we don't know what it's going to cost, so therefore there will be some, run with it. But we're now entering the next we've entered the next financial year, and there has to be a growing focus on the unbudgeted overruns, because if we're going 3.5 million for this, there's a sort of what the heck is that flood damage going to be? Is that another million? Don't know. Because then you go back to the bigger picture that in 10 years' time, we're going to spike and overshot the runway on our debt. But if we keep having $3, $4, $5 million of unbudgeted debt each year, there's only 26 million or somewhere thereabouts of headroom. So consequently, we're now down to 5 years and the ball game changes. Am I reading it right? Am I reading that the unbudgeted overruns are going to force that spike in the debt to come forward and bring our 280% instead of being in 2035, we're on a trajectory with budget overruns that will be 2030 or somewhere around there. Because we really have to start looking. I need to know whether I'm on the right theory so that I know what information to ask, so that I know what I'm looking for.
And again, come back to my comment before, that's the purpose. So the questions have been raised internally as well as externally.
Yep.
And that's the exercise that's being undertaken. Also to reconcile the answer with the 10-year plan, because there is a debt position.
Because it is, I knew that what you were doing that, but there was none of the 10 years, the 2035 spike coming back. That's good if we got it in the system, that's good.
Yeah.
And through you, Mr. Chair, so the the deficit, obviously, the operating deficit is going to be present all year unless something else changes around the way we fund those loans. But in accordance with the budget, the income and expenditure I've got, it is a budgeted deficit. And at this point, if things were all being equal and I was doing things well, that figure should be 883,000, not 1.2 million. So I've still got now 9 months to try and drag that back.
Thanks,
And
Linda.
just and further, finally for you, but you were asking, what more further information do you want? And I think on any of those ones that have a fundamental change to that debt profile, we need to somehow put it in so that we're following every single time.
Yeah, it's the eye to the future and what options there are for the future of the service delivery. Councillor Makatamini, then Councillor Herbert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in reply to the Mayor there, so we've got a $3.5 million budgeted deficit for Three Waters. That has come about because we elected in the long-term plan not to borrow instead of putting up rates.
Yep.
So that's the question. So that's where it's coming from. That's where it'll come from for the next few years. So the alternative to that was to have been bolder and put the rates up together.
Yeah.
Bolder.
Well, we'll
just get stunned.
We're paying for it. I'll say bolder.
Thank you for reminding the meeting of that process, Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Linda. So just on the consultancy on page 36, you talk about the consultancy charges of 430,000. There's one there that Ian Rabbits, who's been looking after Mile Flat, 42K. Is that just for Mile Flat?
And North Bruce.
North Bruce?
He also supports the team with training and other specialist advice around other plants.
Is it possible to tell me how much money Mile Flat spent on consultants today to try and solve this problem?
Potentially.
I appreciate that, thank you.
We'll get a timesheet.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions of Linda? If not, I'm happy to move the report. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Kennedy, all in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Thank you.
Linda, thank you very much. Item number 6 on page 41, risk and assurance work plan, and Mr. CEO.
So we've read as we talked about before, Mr. Chair, and answer any questions if we can. It's just a one-page report, isn't it?
It's a one-page report, and the key to this is my opening comments around the workshop that we're doing in January, the information or the homework exercises that you'll be given prior to that, so that we can actually then put together the work program for 2025, which may look similar, but hopefully will look quite different from the one that we've got in front of us today. So again, I will move receipt. Seconder, Councillor Wheeler, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Mr. CE, you, I assume, are presenting on item 7?
Yes, although Trey might that's he's been part of the audit process as well, so we'll just take it as read again and answer any questions.
And who has a question? We're comfortable with the management responses and timeframes that are being taken to do those. Better read through them, look relatively straightforward. Councillor Makatamini.
Yeah, can I just ask for page 45? So there's the progress reporting on the major projects and review of I assume that WIP was work in progress.
Yes. We're actually getting better reporting now just through the infrastructure committee where they had broken down the last meeting or two. We actually have received quite a bit more detail on those work in progress projects. Is that we're going to go further than that, or is that deemed satisfactory?
So we're through you, Mr. Chairman. We're nowhere near where we still want to be with monitoring financial reporting and project reporting, but there has been an improvement in terms of generic project reporting coming through your committee reports. But we're also talking about category A project financial reporting, and specifically we had a monitoring expectation that we were going to produce financial and risk reports around category A projects that you've identified. So that's a separate one again, and we haven't yet reported financially or risk-wise on those category A projects.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, yeah, because we have been getting more, but you're going to go over and above that again. Yeah.
So reading from the notes in the email that I'm going to send you in a couple of weeks, it actually raises that very issue in terms of the project reports. Are they being reported to the right place, the right information, particularly to give better control of debt management, cost of that debt, impact on rates, and obviously time frame as well, which is really important. Other questions or observations? Not. Mover, Councillor Volwheeler moved, Councillor Ludeman seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Trey, item 8 on page 47.
Kia ora everyone. Really just want to highlight for this one that I had fully intended to have more detailed comments, but we're still struggling putting the budgets in the right system. I've got them in there, but they look a bit funny, so I need to talk to potentially Sharon knows how to fix it, but it might be more an IT issue. So we're very close to it, but we're just not quite there. Other than that, I'm happy to take it as read and try and answer some questions.
But just to add to the explanation around, why are we in this position? Why should we be in this position, and why can't you, report on budgets and that side of things? The answer is we had intended to transfer across to Datascape in July, and that didn't happen. We are now shifting to do that at the end of this financial year. So that was a big change, and so we've got a problem that the ozone related information, which is the original system, we haven't got a transition option, or didn't have a transition option to deal with the interim. Our budgeting system is called IBIS, and we've got a problem transitioning from what's sitting in ozone to the budgeting system in IBIS. So that's the work that the team are having to do internally. We're not getting really supported too much. It's an internal sort of bit of work to be able to get us up and running in the existing system, which is still ozone, until July. So that's why this is unique this year. Again, it's not where we want to be, but these are problems that we are working our way through. But it's not because the team is slack or not doing anything. It's because we've got a unique problem transitioning from our budgeting system into an existing system that should have already been replaced. So that's what they're working on. And as Tracy said, they're almost there, which is good news, because we do seriously need to be able to do that. At the moment, the account managers or the activity managers are budgeting on, monitoring. We've given them 2 different systems. They do have 2 different systems, but they're not merged systems. They're 2 different systems that they're monitoring on. So there is monitoring occurring, and that, but it's not the integrated way that we need it, and that's why we're almost there.
Thank you, Mr. CE. Mayor Brian?
It's sort of it's an obtuse question, Trey, but it's a chance to ask it. We know that there's been some extremely poor advice being given on Facebook to, the stars aren't coming up quite right, don't pay your rates. And I noticed that on rates revenue at the top of page 48, we are down by a bit, 71,000. Is there an increase in the people not paying rates? Or is there a specific, because they are giving advice, don't pay that bit of your rates. Are we seeing any trend in any change?
Not that I can see, but I can go to the rates department, and I'm sure they'll be able to give me an answer.
That's if we could. It's if it's a growing trend that we need to put some sort of comms out to try and counter, but it's a dumb one, but it's out there.
Your worship, the question might be, what's the cash movement relating to rates, as opposed to, we still register rates revenue as revenue in the books. If someone's
receivables.
If someone doesn't pay it, it's still registered as income. And that, so the question might be more of the team around the cash side of receivables. What's the rates cash position versus the budgeted position?
I just saw we're 71 down. I thought, is that the first indication that some are following bad advice?
I think I agree with the CE. I think the question more is, can we have a breakdown of receivables and prepayments? So that figure on page 49 of 7646. That'll give you an indication what's 30, 60, 90 days. Just a reminder to everybody, it is a legal requirement to pay your rates.
Yeah, that's what
pay them.
we know that it is out there, Chair. And as I said, it was an obtuse question, but it was my only chance to ask it.
The other thing about this report, it comes back to, I'm sounding a wee bit like a broken record, but it's one of those reports, what is the information that you want? Staff put a lot of effort into preparing this report, the next report particularly. Is this telling you what you want? Is there other information that you want? And again, just in your own side notes for late January. Other questions or observations? If not, who's moving this one? Councillor Ludeman moved. Worship, the Mayor seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Trey still in the hot seat on page number 50.
So I've got a few comments for this one. So the wastewater median times this month, for October in particular, are quite high. This is mainly due to, well, Isaacs is doing quite a lot of them because of the flooding. So they've got to do the retic stuff, but also they've been called out to quite a few wastewater issues. For the roading contact KPI, looks like I may have made a mistake there, and actually it's a bit higher than what I've put in there. I need to go back and have a proper look at my calcs, and I'll quantify what the changes are for your next meeting, but it looks like it's a bit better than what I've put. And also solid waste has come in since this agenda went to print. So for kilos of waste per resident to Mount Kui, in October it was 43.8 versus a goal of 35. And kilos of waste diverted from Mount Kui was 4.72 versus a goal of 4.92. But other than that, I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Finch.
Thank you. On page 52, and it's your rural water compliance blah blah target.
Yep.
That's only 59%, and your wastewater is 9.1 hours, and your stormwater is 243.3 hours. That's for September, and then you go to October, and it's the stormwater is 125. I get the October, but the September, like the October, could have been the flooding. But yeah, they're very, very high.
Stormwater is one we've always got an issue with because there's a very low quantity of service requests. So, Linda's got something.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks, Trey. I was just going to just iterate that through you, Mr. Chair. So low volume of stormwater jobs, and if we have one that we can't get to, or if it's stormwater, sometimes you've got to wait for water to recede before you can repair something. It does drag out the timeline, so it looks more significant. If there was a lot of jobs, it would just get lost in the numbers.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments?
Just a minor thing, Mr. Chairman. I mean, Linda, you know, in times past, when you have a reason like, you know, the KPI requires, or the DIA KPI requires a median out or reach a side of a fault, and you go to the fault, but you can't actually get there because it's the water's high or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, or whatever that reason. It's physically impossible.
Yeah.
Sometimes the fact that you are there is actually you've met the target, as opposed to that. So I mean, I wonder whether we are looking at things correctly when we are categorising or, you know, putting the action in for it.
Yeah.
It just seems the most times when there's a figure this high, it's often because, hey, I didn't do it. And it sits there for days and days and days, might be low priority, whatever, and it keeps racking up the time, right? And you can see how that can go up to 200 hours because it's physically not being done in a low number, right? And I can understand that as an answer. But
So
if you
Message.
get to somewhere and the answer is, we had to say we, still clocking up time because we couldn't reach the site, like physically reach it, the argument would be, well, actually, that's probably, we did it, we actually done it. So you just have a look at those technical bits.
There would be a
message.
response time, because even if you get there and you can see it in the distance, but you can't actually reach it for safety, then it would still be a response time because you've attended site.
Yes.
So we will check that those numbers are
Yeah, it could be a
reflected.
wee asterisk and saying the reason why, so it doesn't look anywhere near as horrendous as that.
Sorry, that's just a minor.
Just a question then on a similar line, looking at wastewater in September actually, but probably just a generic question and probably one I should know the answer to, but the median hours to confirm resolution of the fault in September at 6.2 hours. Is that from the time that the contractors arrive on site? Because when you look, the median hours to reach the site of the fault is actually 9.1 hours, but then to confirm resolution is 6.2.
So all of the median times are from when the service request is raised with us. There might be a lag between when the service request is raised with us and when it goes to Isaac's, but I don't take that into account. And then for some of these months, you might see an issue of, it looks like we're turning up before we're completing something before we turn up to it, but it's the way I calculate things. So when I calculate it, I calculate everything that has been turned up to within a month. I'm putting that into like the data set and everything that we finished within a month. So there might be stuff that we finished right at the start, or we turned up to right at the start and then we finished the month after. So it's two separate sets of data. And then it's kind of just a hang up about how I do it monthly now. So when we do it in your report time, it's every case that's happened in the year. So there's no difference between the two data sets, but because it's monthly, that in my mind was the best way to do a calculation like that. So I'm capturing everything, so I can do my calcs on the first of the month and I don't have to wait 2-3 weeks till all the data's in. But we do get stuff like this on the occasional month.
And also, can I make the point just looking at the complaints about council's response to rural drinking water issues here, which has got a big red circle around. This is on page 52 for September. The target's less than equal to 1.2. It appears that the result was 1.2. So give yourself a.
That's one with rounding. So
Okay.
there's about 14, I think, is the goal for a year. And if you have, the goal is like 1.2.33 or something. And the total complaints is like 1.233 and the goal is about 1.19. So rounded, it's 1.25, but we were over the rounded figure.
Close.
So it's a difference of about one complaint. One less complaint, we would have been fine, kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trey. Any further questions or observations? If not, do we have a mover? Councillor Payne, seconded. Councillor Ludeman, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Page 63, item number 10, monthly treasury report. Trey.
Greg has left me with a few points to raise for his report. So first part is that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has cut their OCR by 25 basis points to 5.25 in August. This is followed up with a 50 basis point cut after quarter end. The need for OCR cuts to address the weak economy was emphasised. So this is part of the Bancorp and NJW reports at the back of Greg's report. There's weak GDP figures which are expected to help reduce inflation. RBNZ projects this to fall to 2.3% in September, year from 3.3% currently. Interest rates fell sharp. Interest rate swap rates fell sharply over the quarter. Also at the shorter end of the yield curve, where the presumed future OCR cuts have greater influence. September quarter held positive results for most investors. Positive momentum was built as more central bankers entered an interest rate easing cycle. And lastly, there's been a spike in the market volatility in the last quarter since the previous one, to levels not seen since the emergence of COVID-19. MJW notes that they are cautious of market returns in the short term due to conflict in the Middle East and the US election. They continue to advocate for well-diversified investment portfolios managed under a robust governance regime. So that's what Greg had to say about his report, but I can try and take any other questions that you might have.
So before anybody asks, if you have a look at page 71 on your agenda, there's the list of borrowings and the purpose for staff discussions is to actually fill in the gap as to who the owners of that debt is as best as able to be done. Questions from councillors, starting with His Worship.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. On the page 64, top right-hand side, debt balance. So if we look at it, we've got 128 million heading to 165 million. Primary school maths exercise, so that's 4 million a month. But then in October, we took 8 million. Are we able to get each month what we're anticipating in debt? Because is 8 million an anomaly or is it a warning sign? I don't know. The information isn't enough. And it would be good to know what we were, November, December, how much we were going to borrow. Because if we, hold on a minute, warning sign.
We would love to be able to do that. The issue is we find out often on the 18th how much money we're going to pay on the 20th. And then we've got to scramble to find some debt to pay for it.
Yeah.
So we've asked to get contracts in as early as possible so we can make early decisions and then we can project out. But there's just a bit of an issue there.
But if we already know we're going to 165 at the end of the year, we must know how we're getting there. So can we just have a graph of how we're getting there? And then as the information comes in, we'll know whether we've got a problem arising.
Yeah, projected debt levels are important.
Yeah. Well, even quarterly, Chair, whatever we can to get, there's nothing to tell me are we heading towards a problem.
Yeah, no, I would suggest monthly, Your Worship.
Yeah. That is something potentially we can try and do. The issue is the way we budget, it's just divided by 12 and there is no when we expect to do certain things, but it also mostly relies on when a capital project falls. Some capital projects, they might have to rush through and do it in 3 months and then we're done, but that's been budgeted throughout the entire year. I guess it would be possible, but I wouldn't be the one predicting when we're going to do our capital projects. So I'll talk to the capital delivery team to see if that's something they can forecast out and try and get something to you. But because I won't be doing it personally, I don't know how hard or easy that is, I suppose.
Appreciate it. And if we could, because at least if it's there, even whatever form, it does give us an opportunity for
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So along the same sort of lines, we've had $10 million of new debt borrowing this year. And given what obviously Councillor McCann was talking about before, we're forecasting to have about a $12.2 million deficit this year. And some of that's going to be CapEx and some OpEx. Is it possible to get a breakdown of each new bit of debt and what has actually been spent on?
Not a one-for-one. Like I can't tell you this million is for exactly that one thing, but we can do something that gets us close.
Yeah, just something so when I think there's a general theme in the room that we're all getting pretty worried about this increasing number, and we want to sort of put a microscope on where it's going and what it's doing. So look, anything is better than nothing. So just some information around that would be handy each time.
I mean, they look at the cash in the bank and cash coming in, right? And they look at the expenditure that they're going to have to spend, and where there's a deficit, then they need to generate debt, raise a loan, right? It isn't an alignment to a particular project where the debt is attached to that particular project that you are raising the loan for, because it's a treasury function that says cash in versus and what we've got versus what we need to cash out, and the difference is what we need to raise as a loan. And in fact, we've budgeted to have to raise loans for that situation. So we know how much each capital project is cost. We know all that side of things. We know that it's going to be run by debt and all that side of things. But if we raise a loan for $4 million this month, right? You can't attribute that and say that's directly to Three Waters or anything like that. It's a treasury function of the difference between cash in versus cash out, and that's why, and particularly when you're budgeting for operations and you don't have that one-to-one relationship for debt. The treasury function's operating at an over-the-top level, where that's what we're drawing, and that. Now we said one of the issues when we're doing the annual report and that side of things, right? When you take total debt that you've raised for the year, you should be able to determine what proportion of that, once you've gone and reconciled everything, how much of that was actually for operations versus how much was that for capital, in that sense. So that's how you calculate that. But on a monthly basis, or an individual basis, when you're drawing 5 million, 6 million, whatever it is that we're drawing, or every 3 months if it's 10 million, there isn't a one-to-one relationship.
Look, part of me doesn't agree with that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out where we're going from a debt point of view, and we've projected to have a $12.2 million overrun this year. We want to make sure we're tracking not to be any more than that, and to say that it doesn't have a dollar for dollar relationship. Surely we've got budgeted saying there's X amount coming in for dog registrations, X amount coming in for for building it, whatever that might be, and those numbers must line up. Anything different has to be attributed to something.
And so when you, like at a high level, if you take it and say, the new debt related for 4 months, right, is, it's not blown out in the sense of we've spent $30 million for 4 months when we're only supposed to spend, $40 million in total. At a high level, for example, that tells you 10 million. High level says, okay, that's one element of control. You are right. There's a difference in when we say we need to understand projects coming up, cash flow, all that sort of stuff. We did that last year very successfully when we said we're getting very, very close to reaching the debt level, and we were, looking at it on a real close monthly basis of what was coming in and what was going. And we can do it from that perspective of watching what's necessary in that. But when you have your, on an operational sense, right, you've got operational budget reporting every 3 months or whatever, and we keep an eye on what that is happening, and you should get reports on that. And if budget in that reporting, if expenditure is, and activity balances are meeting budget amounts that we said, right, that's good from that perspective. We're still drawing debt because operations is being funded by debt as well.
And that's the figure I want to know. That's the amount that I want to know.
Yeah, but we can do that by budget. But when you're drawing an amount, you can't say, I'm allocating that directly to a capital project or to operations or whatever. You're just drawing that amount, right?
So as everybody knows, this is a subject which is very close to my heart. It's something that I'm paying particular close attention to at the moment. And it's going to be the key discussion point between myself and staff over the next few weeks, and will be further discussed when we get together in late January, early February of next year. And a number of areas. What is the debt for? What is specific to capital projects? And then the projection going forward in terms of alignment with our 10-year plan. Councillor McIntyre.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, yeah, on this whole subject, I actually tend to agree with Stephen Trady on the difficulty of allocating that debt. But from when I first come on council here, I've always felt that the weakness in the reporting is not being able to give us revised cash flow. Now, we've had explanations about software and bits and pieces, but that is the real weakness. If we're going to have overruns, it should be able to be reported on this report, on the revised budget. A lot of us here run our own businesses, and our monthly reporting gives us, we can constantly revise our budget and track where we're expected to be at the end of the year. And if there is going to be an overrun, it should be obvious now as to what it might be at the end of June. And that seems to me to be the real weakness, not the debt levels and where it's allocated.
Yeah, and if you go back to the previous report, looking specifically pages 48 and 49, I think there's a missing column, which is year-end projections.
Yeah, or no, revision, the revised budget, so it's tracking all the time.
And then matching that against the cash flow.
Yeah, so we've got a full year budget, but that should be revised every month.
Correct.
As to where it's going to land. I mean, that's what most of our own, that's what my farm software does. Yeah.
Councillor Ludeman.
So probably following on from that question is, do the departments provide an updated budget to the finance team each month? Because otherwise, the finance team's running a bit blind if the departments don't let them know where their spending is at.
Variation to budget, not
Yeah,
revising the budget.
yeah.
Yeah, I suppose my response to that last comment is we can't revise a budget because budgets are set by the LTP rates. But what we can do is try and project what we're actually going to spend.
Yeah.
So we're not updating the budget
Revised
per se.
cash
What you're
flow.
talking
Yes.
about.
Yes, but that is what a lot of software does.
Yes.
It does give you a revised budget if you like, revised cash flow.
So ours doesn't, but that is something we can try and start doing manually. But to answer your question, we don't, budget holders don't give us what they're going to spend throughout the year. They don't revise that, I suppose. But what we are trying to implement is quarterly finance sits down with those budget heads to have a look at their budget and say, where have we gone over already or where are we under already? So that rather than we find this out at the end of the year that we've overspent and the budget holders don't know, that we can identify these things early and they can try and correct before we get to that point. But they're not necessarily providing us how much they think they're going to spend yet. But that is something that we're trying to put into those meetings as well, is this is where you're at, this is where you're overspending. What do you think you're going to spend as well? So we're not currently doing that, we're trying to start that process as well.
Because it's a good business practice. I mean, you would know, because it's over the whole organisation, you don't expect the finance to be across every business case, but there was reporting on a regular basis.
So,
Ryan?
yeah, and thanks, Trey, for getting this for me yesterday. We got a graph showing that the Plimsoll line was 2035 or 34. There, where our debt is right up to the ceiling, but you're actually looking 4 years' time. If we keep, there's only 45 million of latitude there, and our overruns in 4 years' time, the rate we're going, we'll mop up that 45 million plus more. So on what the whole discussion we're talking about here is that it's not 9 years away that we have to just jump under the bar. If we keep going, it's 4 years, or it might be 3 if we push it hard. And that's the information that I need to know is how are we tracking, because if it's coming at us quicker, we need to know.
So just a couple of things. Just firstly, in answer to his worship, that suggests that things are static and things are not static. The figures change immediately. You make budget adjustments and revenue adjustments, right? So if we have to deal with surplus deficits, how we're funding the deficits. If there was an event that 2 years from now threw a massive wobbly in the deficit, you rechange your budgets, you increase revenue, whatever you do, increase rates and whatever, the whole line's change. So it's not correct to take a change happening today and extrapolate it out and say that means we're going to break the Plimsoll line in 10 years, because that would be a static viewpoint. The other answer to add to the reporting side of things is we want to report, we can't report at the moment, A, because the budget holders don't have the information readily available in the sense of two different systems that we're trying to work to. That's number one. Number two, we haven't been able to put the budgets in, and complete that process to be able to do that yet, because we've had an extended LTP situation, we've had the extended annual report situation, and finance are only just getting on to business as usual in terms of that. We have an intention to absolutely be different from last year in the sense of monitoring for that, because we have had budget adjustments with the LTP, and the expectation is that actually, for the most part, we should be holding our budgets and not exceeding our budgets, right? And my expectation and intention with that is to definitely hold the budget holders to account around that and make calls to ensure that we are minimising the areas of risk associated with that, right? But you have to remember, if you talk about a farm business in that sense, that's pretty stable in the sense of the system's there and you're doing it, it's rolling over and all that, right? We haven't got a stable system, and we didn't have a stable time frame for turning over the year, and we're now getting into that, and we fully intend to hold budget holders to account and report so that you can start seeing how are we sitting. We won't be for a quarterly basis because first quarter's already gone, first 4 months are already gone, right? It'll be more likely where we're sitting in the 6 month point, and that, right? And for my side of things, I'm seriously looking. There's a couple of positives out there. The remuneration levels. That's always a biggie. We're holding the remuneration against budget. That means that that's not blowing out yet. In that sense, it's a good thing, as opposed to what it was last year. In that sense, between different major difference between that and budget. So that's a pretty important figure. In that, the debt, as we say, what were we drawing down at the 4 month point for debt relative to what we should have been drawing down? That's not blown out relative to the budget in terms of that. So that's a good thing. It's not at the level that would say, hey, here's a fantastic report that gives me a sense of satisfaction around, the cash flow, the projection, all that sort of thing. But it's a couple of key indicators before we can get into the sort of stuff that we all want and we can start asking to have delivered. And I'm just highlighting, that this is where we are in the year, and it won't be for that period of time.
Thank you, Steve. Your worship.
Yeah, so precisely this is a moving feast, and that's why I'm labouring today on the simple fact that if there's 9 years, we've got 9 years of opportunity to intervene, but if that's coming closer, we are limited as a governance team to be able to have fundamental changes through intervention. And dare I say it, as I look, like this morning, there was a major one with Mount Kiwi, 15 odd million. Yeah, that makes a fundamental difference. I've got to look at that differently. Dare I say it, and I hate to even mention it, there's a swimming pool that makes a fundamental difference. Do I have to look at that differently if my time frames are closer? There's not many of them. I can see Mount Kiwi, I can see the swimming pool, and then we're getting down to the rats and mice that we've got to look after. But if 9 years is now coming to 4, if I'm reading it right, then it makes me change my decisions or re-scrutinise my decisions on a couple of those key ones. And if that's not right, then I need to know, because I am making those decisions now.
So thank you, and acknowledge the comments that a number of you have made around the table or outside of this forum. You're well aware of my priority in terms of this subject as well. Really appreciated the debate today and look forward to being able to bring some information back to the council meeting in February, as you were, risk and assurance meeting in February, which actually addresses these issues and gives you the information to debate, whether that's around reprioritising capital expenditure, whether it's around further deep dives into operational cost. That will be the time we're able to do that with that factual information in front of us, Your Worship.
So, and once again, I labour on it, because what I'm trying to get is, am I on the right one? Because by the time we come to your workshop, we've already decided on the swimming pool. I need to know today, am I on the right track? And I have to start, that's the right thought process, or Nah, we're still all right, we're heading out to there. Because I can't wait till February, we make the decision on one of those two that I said in 2 weeks' time.
Do you have the information to enable you to make the decision?
No, I can't work out whether it is 2034.
No, in terms of the capital project.
Oh, yeah, we know it's a biggie.
So
But
we know.
if I put the helicopter perspective into it that I am, it is making it has the potential to make.
So we understand rating impact.
Yes, and.
I just want to respond, like, I can give you an answer. You want to know an answer. The answer to your statement that you said, Your Worship, about are we in trouble at the 4-year point? Answer no. I don't know where you're getting the 4-year, calculation from to say that the position we might be in relation to the 10-year point or whatever is at the 4-year point. The answer is no. Not from any information I've got. That would be that answer.
So you're having a discussion in December. So I imagine that there will be a very detailed report prepared for consideration, which identifies the cost, the funding, the rate impact, the level of usage, the revenue requirements from the users. I imagine that's all there. I can't add to that at this stage. Are there any other questions of Trey in respect to his report on Treasury impact? If not, do we have a mover and a seconder?
Sorry, I've just got a couple of things here.
And I'll let you move the report.
After I move, sorry, I'll move the report after. Mr. Chairman.
Right.
That's okay.
Page number.
Page 68, we've got the percentages of the portfolio for October 24. Just note that the percentages used are the same as in September, so they need to be updated there. They're not the same. Done the calculations on that. Similarly at the bottom of the page where we've got the variances.
Yep.
As well. And then going over to page 69, it has our closing balance there of, it's got a figure of 27,127,403. But the closing balance it's given in on page 66 is 27,112,46.
I will have a discussion with Greg about that.
Just a minor variation there.
Yep.
And then I have a question regarding the interest rates. We've got on page 70, at the bottom, as of October, we've got 129 million borrowed, and the interest rate is the cost of funds is 4.61%. Go over to page 71 and look at the interest rates there for all the different borrowings, different maturity dates, and the percentage is 5.68%. Is there an explanation?
So the percentages on page 70 are done by Bancorp, and they incorporate all of our interest rate swaps. And the purpose we have those interest rate swaps is to lower our cost of capital. And what's on 71 is calculated by me, and that is just, if we had no interest rate swaps, we had nothing to lower our interest, that's what we would be paying. That's what we're actually paying on our debt. But our total cost of funds is on page 70, and that's what Bancorp's calculated because they have better knowledge of how the interest rate swaps affect our total interest that we pay. So they're two separate figures, but I just put on page 71 a good indication so you can see as a buy loan type of thing, rather than a total with our interest rate swaps, because Bancorp are the experts here.
Right. So the figure is on page 71. What the rates that we borrowed at initially?
So
It's the gross cost.
that's currently what we're paying. So some of these, if you look at in column, like the first column, if it says FRB, that means fixed rate bond. So those ones don't change. That's exactly what we borrowed at the time. Where FRN, that means fixed rate note. So that's, floating rate note. So those change. I'm not sure if it's weekly or if it's month to month, but that's on one of the LGFA's base rates. So each one of those lines, we have whatever the LGFA base rate is plus a percentage. So some loans have a plus 0.6 margin and others have plus 0.3. So those ones are floating and they do change, and I update this to as accurate as I can get it at the time. And CP just means commercial paper, so that's our really short-term loans. And there's no interest put on here, but we pay interest on maturity. So for that 11.5, for example, that's coming up next month, and we'll pay about 100K of interest on top of it. So it's like that kind of thing.
Thank you. Other questions? If not, do we have a mover? Report.
Yes.
Councillor Bruce, Councillor Herbert, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. That's the end of the open meeting agenda. So can I now have a...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, my apologies, because I flipped over and I didn't have the quarterly treasury report, but I have one question. Could I be a nuisance and ask a question?
Depends on the question.
Okay, so on page 79, you see the third of the boxes, it says headroom, 40.0 million.
Yes, I can answer that.
So we need to have a look at that, because that figure's wrong, or something's wrong back here, because 40 million, we spent another 8 million in October, there's 32 million. We're budgeted to borrow another 37 million, but that's not the case because we do have headroom. So where does that 40 million,
So
where are we at?
I had a call with a finance consultant about that this morning. Headroom means how much funds we have available within the next few days. So if we needed to, for whatever reason, pay $40 million on Friday, we could. So it's all the stuff, all our assets that we can turn into cash on a very short-term basis. So it's what cash we have in the bank, as well as the NICO investment, which we could turn, the parts of that we can turn into cash.
So it's not the headroom that we would.
No, it's the liquidity
That's
headroom
good. Yeah.
versus the LGFA headroom, which is about 80 million. So, yeah, they're two different things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, with that, mover on page 98. Councillor Bolwheeler, seconded Councillor Herbert. All in favour, aye. Against, carried. We'll just take a 1 minute recess just while we're closing down.
Well, the only question, Mr. Chairman, which is the whole point of the recommendation, is that you could potentially do that in open as per the recommendation number 2.
Do we want to do it in open?
Because if they're only minutes,
Let's do it.
often it's just the issue of approving the minutes.
Okay, I'm happy
And
with
if
that
you had to have
advice.
debate, you would go into exclusion.
Yeah, sure. So the mover and second are happy with that advice? Yes.
Yes.
So we go to page number yellow 2. Kennedy, seconded Councillor Payne, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. I just want to be the first one to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You might think, why am I doing that? Well, the answer is because 5 weeks today, we're just sitting down to Christmas lunch, believe it or not.
Won't have one this year.
So thank you for your attendance today. Thank you for your input. I'll close with the karakia, kua mutu, a mātu maki, mori tīn awa, manaki tia mai o māta katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, ai o ki te aorangi. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your input.
Can I just check, is Bruce Graham, an apology for all the day?
He hopes to get in this afternoon, but he may have to get someone to chair.
So I could
He's
share
had
this.
some, mental